West, Bob Goodrich and Ken Miller and Cal and 714-258-0644, whoever you are secretly. And also, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Bill Padoka just arrived.
Oh, great. And Bill, we've got.
I think maybe Jean's internet is froze up.
Oh.
Jean, can you hear us?
Jean, you there? I think you're having your internet issue.
Yes, I'm having my internet issue. I'm going to get off of this and go on my phone, which generally works because my internet doesn't work when it's raining, which you just love, don't you? Okay, I'll be back in about minutes.
Jean, you're muted.
Mute. I'm probably going to have someone else chair because I cannot see everyone. So would anyone like to chair? Barbara, Bill, Michelle?
Ernie will volunteer if nobody else will stand up.
Thank you, Ernie.
Okay, I don't have the.
Thanks. I'll tell you what the agenda is. The agenda is the privilege of the floor, and as I backed out when I didn't hear any voices.
I can share the agenda and put it on the screen if that would help.
That would be great. Good. And I'll move on while that's going. I don't hear anyone saying they want to speak to privilege of the floor. I'll go on to the minutes of the October 12th meeting with one correction. Barb noticed that I had put the wrong month in for the next meeting. So the next meeting. Oh, Ken, I'm sorry, I can't see you. So yes, you may have privilege of the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just couple of questions. I don't know why this commission would want to try and designate agricultural areas. The farmers in Caroline are good farmers that are left. They know where good land is. They use that good land to the best of their abilities. And as far as telling anybody what the good and poor land is, that's already been made up by Tompkins County Soil and Water. They have maps of that. Those are the maps that probably should be used for any telling. And the other thing that I like to know is why, with all the commercial west of Slaterville, why the boundary might be shortened when instead of being extended all the way with all the rentals that are available to the west also, why commercial zoning wouldn't be extended all the way to the town border line that crosses Route 79. I think that should be looked at and extended in your map so that especially if we can get some thing like a hardware store in that would supply farmers with needed bolts instead of having to drive through Ithaca and spending an hour in traveling. It would be great. And that western part of Caroline along 79 is the best place for as much commercial as we could put in there, especially to increase our tax bases. That's what I have to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Ernie, I'm turning this over to you now.
Okay. Does anybody want to comment on Ken's comments? Or is that not appropriate at this point?
Not appropriate at this point.
Okay. Then I will, is there anyone else who is interested in speaking? No, then I will say the privilege of the floor is now closed. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the October 12th meeting. Would anyone like to?
I'll move to approve them.
I will second it.
Okay, that was moved by Evie and seconded by Bruce. We have approved the last meeting's minutes. We'll move on to the town council report. Tim?
We
anything?
have to
Point of
vote on,
correction.
we have to
Right.
vote on the
Oh, you have to
minutes.
vote on it. I'm sorry. I'm just, my Robert's rules of order are somewhat unruly. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? So be it, passed. Now, on to item 3. Town council report, anything from town council? Tim?
I'll just mention that, sorry guys. I'll mention that because of Election Day, we're having the November agenda meeting on Wednesday, the 3rd, instead of Tuesday, the 2nd. Same time at 7 o'clock.
Anything else?
At that time, we will be holding a public hearing on the budget. So if any of you are interested, we'd love to have your input. That's all I have.
All right. Planning committee report, anything from Bill Podolka?
Yeah, I'm pleased to report that we're that one step closer on the battery storage law. I now have revisions from Will, and I just need to look them over, and then we'll be ready to send that to the town board. So the hard work by Will is now done, and I just have to take one look at it. So we're very close now. That's it.
Okay, then I would like to move on to our guest this evening, Jay Franklin, Director of Assessment, who will give us a little more information on how zoning may affect our taxes.
Good evening, everyone. Jean, I see your hand up. You have a.
I just wanted to introduce you and say I wanted to thank Jay so much for coming. We had some questions about how this does affect people's taxes before we move along, and I thought you could give us that. Thanks.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here tonight. I love these Zoom meetings. Trying to get to Caroline tonight with all the flooding would have been fun. So I was worried if I left my driveway, I wouldn't be able to get back in because the water is all running down by the road and kind of skipped the ditch. So hopefully it won't wipe away, but we'll see. But thanks for having me. Kind of go into a little how the assessment process works. So my office is charged with determining the market value of all property within the county, all real property, based upon its current use. Now that's a very big key here when you're talking about changing zoning. So we have to look at what that property is, how it's being currently used, and value it according to that use. For those who've been around here a while, you may remember Doc Weiner's batting cages, putt-putt course, driving range down on Route 13, down on Elmira Road. When that was there, we had to value it as that entertainment complex that it is, or that it was. However, the highest and best use for that land, you know, the one that's most financially rewarding to the owner, was selling it for big box development. So even though its highest and best use was in the millions of dollars, when he was operating it as an entertainment facility, we had to look at it simply what that was and what the value of that entertainment facility is. We see this all the time in College Town, in the city of Ithaca. The dirt is worth a lot more than the income producing ability that someone would pay for that small apartment building is on there. You know, we've had some of the most valuable land sales in upstate New York, really in upstate New York, or New York anywhere outside of New York City, just due to that redevelopment potential. And that makes my job a lot easier, or our job in the office, by only having to value what is there. If we had to look at what is the highest and best use on every single property, it would take 10, 20 times the people that I have in my office right now, because we have to run that iteration on what is the most financially rewarding development for that owner. And then you'd actually be taxed on what your potential is rather than what you're actually at. Now, there is one difference. Now, for vacant land that is unused, so we're not talking about the agricultural land, this is just land that's holding the earth together. That's the one type of property class that we can look at and say, all right, what is the highest and best use of this land? Is it for development purposes? Or is the highest and best use of that land holding the earth together? You know, there's a lot of parts within this county where there isn't development pressure. You know, its highest and best use may be for recreational land. Someone may buy it, they may put one house on it, but still the value is there for that person's enjoyment, that person's recreation, the person being able to use it as agricultural land. We're not really seeing a whole lot of developments go in. Now, if you're talking land on Route 13, if you're talking land in the southern part of Lansing, then you're looking at some land having development pressure. But outside of that, zoning really wouldn't affect the current use of that property. So that wouldn't change someone's assessment because we have to value it in its current use. If we had some development land, you know, that may change. As Ken spoke, if you were to change land to a business and it's on Slaterville Road or some sort of commercial designation, that may change the value of some of that commercial or the vacant land that's there, because it now could be used for a higher, denser, more valuable use moving forward. So that's the one property class which could see a change based upon zoning and what you could do there. But obviously we'll have to see how the market responds to any changes in zoning that you have or that you make, and see how those changes react within the market. So I'll stop there if people have questions. I see. I don't know if you want me to call out people, or if Ernie, if you would want to do that.
Why don't you go ahead? I'm not able to get the full screen. I can't see everybody at the same time for some reason.
I can see about 6 of you. So I think I saw, is that Evie? My eyes are blind. We'll go Evie and then Bill.
Thanks, Jay. And thanks so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge. It's really helpful. It's probably going to raise a lot of questions. At least the first one for me is, how does it work? And this is me just not knowing. How does it work just in terms of thinking about land that is currently not zoned, which is all of Caroline, but let's say on Route 79, where it may become a commercial zone with potential for construction on it. And if that land is owned and and the owner would like to sell it, are you still assessing it? Are you assessing it at highest best, like you said, if it's vacant land? Or are you assessing based on whatever future zoning may apply?
Not the future zoning, but we're gonna look at what the current zoning is of that property and what the highest and best use would be for that property. Now, the highest and best use isn't gonna be a casino for every property. You know, the highest and best use may just be the land itself. It may be a auto repair shop. You know, it may be an apartment building. So we really have to look at where that property is located, how other properties have changed in use. If you had a piece of vacant land that sold, and be able to see really what would fit on that property, what the demand is, and then be able to make a market value estimation based upon that. Where'd you go?
Okay, thanks. I have another question, but I'll wait. Go ahead. Who's
Hey,
the
Bill.
next person?
Okay, mine's sort of a corollary to Evie, so just to drill down this a little bit. So, Jay, as you know, we're currently have no zoning in Caroline, so any use is possible in general on any piece of land. So along Route 79, for example, if you were looking at vacant land, a commercial use would be a possible use for that land. If that property got zoned residential, I could imagine that therefore it might get value appraised at a lower value after zoning. If that property were wound up in a zone that was a commercial zone or a mixed residential commercial zone, that doesn't take away maybe that highest best use you were looking at. So that's just, so I want that specific case, since we're unzoned now, so all uses are allowed. And there's a parcel that winds up in a commercial zone, is it appraisal going to change at all? And if it's a parcel that winds up in a strictly, no, you're not allowed to do commercial here, what's likely to happen with the appraisal?
I would say right now, nothing would change immediately. With no zoning, you can do what you want. Once we see zoning, we're going to have to see how the market responds to that. And is there a demand for commercial along Slaterville? Is there more demand for multifamily housing? We're going to have to see how that market reacts. Now, one thing that may be a benefit is with zoning, if you have your house, you also know then what's going to be built around you. It's going to be a similar use. Right now, there's really uncertainty as to what's going to be built across the street from you if that's vacant. So I think buyers go into buying in a non-zone town, knowing that there is the possibility that something undesirable will be built next to them or across their street. So that would provide some certainty on a homogeneity, that word, of use within certain properties. So that could be a benefit to the other properties as well.
Okay, so
But
I understood you,
for
but
now, sorry.
potentially a residence could be appraised higher because basically properties would sell for higher because people were more likely to want to buy a house for a residence if they knew they weren't going to get an unpleasant neighbors. Am I hearing you right?
Correct. So
Okay. Thank you.
When the real estate market doesn't like uncertainty, we like to know known things. And if you know that a garbage, a waste transfer station isn't going to be built across the street from you, you may be more willing to pay a little bit more for that property to know that that sort of use isn't going to be built around you.
Great, thank you.
Barbara?
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. One is with regard to your comments about the appraisal value. Can you talk about so how the appraisal value for a newly zoned area would affect both property taxes that go to the town and would affect the sale value that the owner of the property would derive from selling that property? So that's the first question. And then the second question is if something is zoned commercial, would the real estate market then for residential parcels within that commercial district, would the resale value or sale value in the real estate market likely go down for residential parcels in a commercial district because of the kind of implications that you're talking about, that, a commercial, waste dump could be next to my house. And so the value of my residential parcel might go down if I'm located in that commercial district.
Correct. On your second question, if you change the use and change the uses that are surrounding that property to ones that aren't as, that don't look like it, that creates conflict between those parcels. And I think buyers would be hesitant to go into that knowing that some commercial development would go into that property right next to that. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. And another odd thing is we're in such a crazy market right now that if we talk about properties decreasing in value, if there were a change in zoning to go from residential to commercial on that residential house, at this point, that may become a lower price alternative for some elsewhere. When someone's looking for a house and they may say, nope, I'm fine with that. I don't care. That's a house I can afford right now. I'm going to get it. So we have to talk about that caveat right now of just what crazy market we're in. Now, your first question again, remind me of that.
So the first question was, you were talking about appraisal values. So, like on a zoned property, as newly zoned property, the appraisal value might change, go up or down.
Yeah.
Does that have an implication for both property taxes that get paid to the town as well as the sale value of that property if the current owner wanted to sell it to somebody?
Yeah. So if you were to change zoning, obviously that affects what you can do on the property, and that's probably going to affect what someone's willing to pay for that property. But we also have to measure what sort of demand is there as well. If you were to zone Slaterville for big box stores, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of big box stores going out. So there's not going to be that sort of demand. So it's when we talk in generalities of commercial and residential, the commercial I'm thinking is in scale towards that community that's there. We're not going to see a 80,000 square foot BJ's. Based upon it, you may see a 9,100 square foot Dollar General. It seemed to be popping up all over the place. So that's kind of the scale you're looking at. So yeah, values could go up or down. Now, with tax dollars coming in, if the value of the town of Caroline doubles this next year, no new tax dollars are created. The town is still going to need their $1.4 million tax levy, and I'm just guessing at what that is, in order to do the business that they need. The county's still going to have a $54 million tax levy. Ithaca City School District still going to have a $93 million. What's going to happen is that tax rate's going to drop so that the town generates that same amount of money. If you add more property, if you add more value, it really doesn't mean that the taxing jurisdictions need more. Once you get into services and fire districts and water and sewer, then there may be a incremental cost, or a cost once you hit a certain level. If you add one more house, you don't need to buy a new fire truck. If you add 1,000 new houses, you're probably going to have to add more fire trucks and more services for that. So that's why one thing, when we value property and go to change an assessment, we value it based upon either a market change or a new lumber change. And you'll see tax levies can increase due to that new lumber change. So with some new lumber, there are new services and it may create more taxes. But what's really going to happen is you're going to have a larger tax base which then you can reduce the tax rate, and then everyone's taxes should be able to drop as you build your taxes.
Thank you.
Jay, I have a question.
All right. Hey, Bruce,
Hey, how are you, Jay?
what's up?
I have a question. Say I own land on, say I own like, say, 10 acres on Route 79. Everything gets zoned commercially around me. Does my, like, one prime acre that the house is on remain residential and the rest get taxed commercial? Or does just my lot still stay residential?
Is your lot being used for as a house right now?
Yeah, say it's just one residence on it. And
Yeah, there wouldn't be a change. We're still gonna look at that as a house on 10 acres. You know, we're not gonna say, or there's a house on 1 acre, these other 9 acres you should do something with.
Okay.
That's why we always tell people, hey, consolidate these parcels, because the sum of the parts is always greater than the whole. So if you have 10 1-acre lots, those are gonna sell for more than 1 10-acre.
okay,
Even if you were easily able to go through that subdivision, there's some value in someone already having those subdivided out. Now, the one thing we would then have to see, though, is everything else is commercial around you. How is the market going to react to a house that's surrounded by land that's now zoned commercial?
correct.
So you never want to be the odd person in real estate.
Okay, thank you.
Evie, let's go back to you. Where are you?
I'm right here. Thanks, Jay. Two questions. You mentioned fire districts. I had never thought of that. Does zoning introduce any potential changes for fire districts? That's one question. And the other question is, we're anticipating public input soon with a public meeting, and we've been talking a lot about how to respond to people's likely questions. And you had said a few minutes ago that whatever it wasn't going to happen right away. Do you have any sense of how long or how many turnovers or what the real estate market would need before the changes in assessment would reflect the imposition of zoning? So fire districts, and how long a time frame?
Yeah, I don't think the change in zoning should affect fire districts unless that zoning change brings in different types of properties or more properties in which they would need different equipment. So you'd kind of have to look at that. With battery storage, is there going to be a large gigawatt battery storage facility that you may need special firefighting equipment to be able to handle? You don't have any mines like Cargill, but is there any special training that your fire department may need to respond to something that would happen in a mine, however 1,000 feet down into the earth? So there may be complexities of properties that would be introduced, but overall, your fire districts really shouldn't change because of zoning. Second question. Normally I write something down, but I'm stuck in my basement. I don't have anything. So your second or your first, your second question.
Do you want me to repeat it?
Well, what happens, how quickly it's going to happen?
Yeah.
I don't know. If I knew what the real estate market would do, I wouldn't be here talking to you all. I'd be a developer and be rich and would be stuck in my basement here in my office. So it's, and it's hard to say, one sale doesn't make a market. But does 2 sales, 3 sales? We just need to see what's happening. And the art of appraisal is art and science. Numbers are going to get you into an area. You can look at that property. It's going to say, yeah, I can make these adjustments. I think it's going to be somewhere between 300 and 350,000. And then it's up to that appraiser's experience and knowledge that they've been able to gain over the years to say, no, I think this is on the lower end because it's on a busy road. It's next to this house that's a dump right now. So I think it's going to be on the 300. But it could be like, nope, you're close to conserved land. You're on a quiet road and you don't see any other neighbors. So we're going to go 350 on that. So it's not something that we're going to say it's going to change is going to happen tomorrow. Change is going to happen in 6 months. But the change will happen when that change occurs in the marketplace.
Thanks.
Or how vague of an answer could I have said there?
That was pretty vague.
That
was good, though.
It's just one of those where, you really don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, if you were to change the zoning on Trip Hammer Road in the village of Lansing, right off of Route 13, that could cause a shift the next day. In the city of Ithaca, when they changed the zoning with the old Trevlock building, and rather than going up only 40 feet, you could go up 140 feet. That zoning change caused the value change the next day. Changing zoning out on Caroline and Slaterville Road, we're really going to have to see how the market responds to that.
Okay. Food for thought. Thanks.
See anyone else? I don't see any other hands.
All right.
I see Jean.
I just wanted to say thank you again. That was really very helpful, and I think we will all use that information. Thank you very much, Jay.
Oh, no problem. Again, I always give this kind of spiel at the end, but even though I work for the county, I do consider myself town employees as well. We're unique here in Tompkins County is that we're countywide assessing. So the town doesn't have an assessor, but I am your assessor. So feel free to use me as you need, invite me out to whatever meeting. Mark should know this as well. So, if you need something, give me a yell. And one thing I like about these Zoom meetings is I get to see inside all your houses too, so.
Oh, no.
Just don't use that.
Oh, no.
Finished basements, so no.
All those
Uh-oh.
finished basements.
If you need something, feel free to give me a reach out. We'll be there to help.
Thanks.
So much, Jay.
All right, take care, everyone. Have a good night. Stay dry.
You too.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Stay home.
Bye.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is planning for the public meeting, and I think Jean is probably the one most able to speak on this. If she's
Thank you.
here.
So you all have gotten the content and the timeline that I forwarded to you, and I don't really see any need to run through it, but I'd love to hear people's comments about, let's talk about the content first and then see how the timeline would work. I can't see people, so if anybody has a comment, or I can sort of tell you what I'm thinking about. Maybe I should just do that so we're all on the same page. So
Yeah.
we're thinking about a Zoom meeting on December 2nd, a Thursday, and then open houses that weekend or the following week or something like that, where we would have posters of things and some of us would be there and trying to do those perhaps in fire halls or something like that, so that people could come in and look at the maps and look at what we're talking about and say things to us. That way they could attend the Zoom meeting if they wanted and hear, and then they could come in and make comments, which I think would prove very useful. I'm thinking about a 90-minute Zoom meeting. If we had to go to 2 hours, we could, but I think that's a long time for people. Nan had said that she would prepare a PowerPoint presentation, sort of what she had done originally for the town board. And then it would go through about the comprehensive plan and the task force and the zoning commission, the purpose statements, which we have done. The decisions that we have talked about so far about having sort of almost a townwide agricultural rural zone. It's essentially one big zone with parts taken out of it. So one part might be the hamlet zone or hamlets zone, depending on how we think about that, and a commercial zone or zones again. And the agricultural rural zone would be the most of the town, is what we have discussed so far. We could have in writing, or we could say some of the things that Jay has just said to us about how would this affect, or we're now able to answer those questions about assessments. We could present survey questions on Zoom. I thought about the Hamlet one or several. Are there other zones that you think we should have? Industrial. It's really kind of hard for us to have a marina zone since we don't have an ocean or even a river. We could have breakout sessions if we wanted to, and I can get facilitators. I've asked, and I have 4 or 5 people who have volunteered, who are trained. But I think if we can have the open meetings that people would stop into, I think that would be more effective. Talk again about how we further public meetings, invite everyone to stop by. That's what I'm thinking about. So what do people think about that in terms of content? Barbara has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jean. So in general, I like the ideas that you've presented and the, kind of the time frame and sequencing. The one piece that I have concerns and reservations about is the idea of polling people on Zoom, with kind of simplistic questions that they say yes or no to, or they, give a ranking to, or whatever. I think the purpose of, for sure that, this first series of public engagement, the Zoom meeting and the discussions and, fire halls and stuff, is really to get more at the reasons people are thinking the way they're thinking, and the perceptions and why people have perceptions and what they're valuing. And I think asking people to essentially vote on, do you like A or B, it kind of defeats the purpose of us trying to understand the reasons of why people are thinking the way they're doing. And a lot of research would say that once you get people to to check a box to vote yes or no, they become wedded to that particular position and less amenable to understanding different ideas and different positions. So I would not want to use a polling framework. I would be much more in favor of discussion, small group work, hearing people in person, using Post-it notes, but not getting people to vote somehow yes or no on something.
Thanks. Very good points, Barb. Bill has his hand up.
All right, so yeah, so first I will second what Barb said. I agree with that about the questions, and that it would be more useful to have some sort of discussion format for that. I can go with this, but I do have reservations about how it's laid out, because as we discussed at the last meeting, there's sort of 2 purposes here. One is to sort of help bring the community up to speed on sort of what zoning is and what we've been doing, what we've learned, that kind of stuff. And the other part is to get information back from the community, about to help feed into our thinking and our process. And because I agree that the simple questions of should it be hamlets or not wouldn't really engender the kind of feedback that would be useful, the Zoom meeting becomes all a presentation, and the open houses become all of the information gathering. And that means that someone who doesn't want to go to an in-person meeting can't really adequately give feedback to the committee. And someone who doesn't have decent internet can't hear the information that Nan is presenting. So that's what I don't like, is it too much separated the 2 purposes. And As Gene knows, I had made a proposal more along the lines of you have a Zoom meeting and a couple of days later you have an in-person meeting, but both of those are covering the same content. That you have the presentation by Nan, we have question and answer, because people have a lot of questions. It'd be great to have Nan there to answer questions over Zoom. And then we do some breakout sessions where people can chat and talk and give feedback on what we like or don't like. And then a couple of days later, you do roughly the same thing again in person. And there, again, the presentation could be a recording of what Nan had just said a couple of days before, so she doesn't do it again. But there has to be, again, some sort of question answer, because the people there in person would want to have their questions answered too. And then finally, you could do some breakout sessions there or the math symposium. So, you know, again, I'm convincible. I'll do what the group wants to do, but to me, there's too much separation. So therefore, different parts of the community get cut out either of the explanation or the ability to give feedback. And so that's my concern about the way it was laid out.
Thank you, Bill. I saw somebody's hand up. Was it Edie?
Ernie's just going to say, I agree completely with Bill. And I think that, you know, you really could distill this down to 2 meetings, a Zoom meeting and an open house, and leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm going to join in on that as well. I was troubled by the issue of having 2 different venues, because it really did seem that the risk for splitting the group into 2 styles would leave people's voices out. I mean, we can collect information in a chat, on a chat box during Zoom, but that's hard to do because people want to listen. And if they're really being thoughtful, you kind of have to split your mind in two directions, which I know I can't do very well. But I'm inclined to agree with Bill's point.
This is
So let me
Bruce.
make sure I understand what people are saying. Are you saying that we have a Zoom meeting and we get comments in chat, and perhaps we can break out into small groups and have some discussion? And we have the presentation by Nan. And then at the open house, there's also a presentation. Bill or Ernie?
That was
that's
my
what I like.
suggestion.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. The
Yes,
same
That's exactly it.
presentation.
Yep.
Yeah, it could be recording,
Okay.
and then face to face.
I guess my only concern about that is the size of the meeting. Because I am concerned about having what I would think of might be a large public meeting with, you know, with a whole lot of people at it, rather than just people kind of coming through. So what do you think about that? Is
This-
anyone else
this
concerned?
Bruce. Yeah, I believe you're gonna have a large meeting no matter what you do. And I agree with Ernie, Bill, and Eve on what they're saying. I don't think there's any way you're gonna control a few people coming through a meeting. I think when you bring this out to the public and state that you're gonna have it at the fire hall or something else, you're gonna have a full room without any question.
And that's a good thing in a lot of ways, because if we do it in a way that doesn't get perceived as welcome that way, then it will just reek of it being only those who have access to internet and Zoom get the real information, and those who come in person have something that looks and sounds and smells different, and that bothers me.
Could I just ask can I ask a question?
Yeah, I see Bill's hand up and Nan. Is that, I think. is that right?
Michelle's also, but Nan should go ahead before I speak.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around just the nuts and bolts of how to organize this. So if I hear what you're saying, you want to offer people the same input. Some people may choose to do it online. Some people may choose to do it in person. Does that kind of summarize it? So one thing that you could do, because I really I really think that to have a presentation where people they come at 2 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever time, they sit in chairs and they watch a presentation, and then everyone raises their hand and wants to ask a question or whatever, in a big group with 50 people or 100 people or however many people come. I just think that this topic of zoning is a very emotional one that people have strong opinions about. And my experience is that when you have a big group of people and you kind of have audience style seating, they watch a presentation and then you're like, well, what do you think? What are your comments? What are your questions? The first person to stand up is typically the one that changes the whole emotions of the room. And people who have something to say are usually stymied because of that emotional charge that comes up. They're not, I just don't think that a big room full of people is an effective way to get feedback, because most people are not going to be comfortable expressing their opinions in a large group, a large room. So the original idea of the open house was to allow people to offer the same kind of input that we would on Zoom. We could look at the map, we could talk about the districts, we could talk about the uses or the overlays or whatever we want to focus in on that you want feedback on. But you could say, like, let's say it's 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, there's going to be a half an hour presentation, and it's either me doing it again or it's recorded. And then after that presentation is over, people are then free to move from station to station to talk with you guys, not in a big group setting. I just am very afraid of that. The big group setting is not a reflection of all of the people that are there, because most people will not talk. They're going to be upset. The first person who's upset is going to be the loudest. And I guarantee you that changes the whole mood of the room. And then people just won't say, only the agitated people will say what they want to say. And the others, you have no idea what they're thinking. So if you want to do a presentation, I'd say you could say, well, we're going to have a set time for a presentation, and then we're going to do an open house where you can be free and we can structure the conversation more in smaller groups, one-on-one. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Nan. Bill is next, and then I have Michelle.
And then Bruce.
And then Bruce.
Okay, and so Nan, I hear you, and I, we've been through that in this town on any number of issues. So, I get it. And I'm okay sort of with cutting out what maybe the question and answer session, if that's where this dynamic is most likely to get established. Also, a moderator could say, this is not a time for statements. This is a time for asking Nan a question. So we might be able to diffuse the situation that way, but it can easily get out of control because people don't adhere to that rule, and the moderator may not be forceful enough to enforce that rule. But in terms of gathering feedback, absolutely. You don't gather feedback with a group of 70 people in a room giving testimony one after the other. That's the public hearing, which comes later. I would agree that this needs to be small groups for the feedback. So if we need to derail the Q&A to get us to that without people being too upset and incensed, we can do that. But I think, yes, a presentation of a finite length, 30-ish minutes. I'd prefer there to be a Q&A where people can ask clarifying questions, but maybe that's too dangerous. And then they break up, either to wander around the room at maps, or we go off into different corners with different groups. And in a setting of 10 people, you have a bunch of different conversations. Still, I admit, running the risk there's a strong individual in that particular group who will dominate that group, but at least you give some space and chance for other people in other groups to talk. So I would agree, you don't try to have a 70-person conversation about this stuff. That doesn't work. So my proposal was, yes, a presentation, Q&A, and then small groups. That's what I thought for the in-person as something similar on Zoom. But like I said, it's okay to try to avoid the issue of if a Q&A is too likely to cause problems. We'll figure something out.
I think it's Michelle and then Bruce.
Yeah, I guess when I think about that large gathering, I have to be honest, I actually wouldn't feel safe with a bunch of people yelling with transmission. I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't. Even though people are vaccinated, I know plenty of people that have been vaccinated that have then, contracted it again or whatever. And a room full of people yelling is like the best way to transmit.
Yeah.
So I would personally not feel safe. And so if you all want to do that, that's great. But and I want to help out, but I don't think I'd feel comfortable in that environment. And I also wonder, like, why can't we have people submit questions? Like, can't the questions all be submitted in writing? And then at a later time, we would go over the questions and evaluate them. Why do we have to field the questions live necessarily?
Right. Well, it's not uncommon to have a meeting like this where people pass questions forward and they get read to Nan and she answers them live. But you're right. That is one way this is diffused. It takes away the soapbox scenario and just gets down to questions. And a moderator can choose which questions to read.
Okay.
Yep.
Bruce.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I believe you could diffuse the whole thing by having written questions, and there's always going to be, the voice in the room. But I believe that's our job facilitating this, is to diffuse that, and I think we could do that. I agree that maybe we shouldn't have it in, open facility, but it depends on what's going on at the time as far as COVID goes. But I believe, that you really do need to have as many people as you can get voices from present, because if it doesn't happen now, then it's really going to turn into a problem later, is what I look at. You're going to have the people that didn't get to say something or didn't get to submit a question. When it comes the next time down the road, it could be a real problem where we wouldn't be able to control it. So
let me ask, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Were you finished?
No, go ahead. That's fine. I'm done.
I was going to ask, I don't think we heard from Barbara on this. Hey, you have any comments, Barbara?
No, I mean, I agree with the trying to keep the notion that individuals are encouraged to speak respectfully and everybody feels safe being there. So I agree with the idea of not having a forum where 100 people may be invited to speak at the same time, because I think you're right that you hear from the loudest, most emphatic voices, and that sets the tone.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is, let's see if we can do something where we have this Zoom meeting. We have a presentation. We ask people on that to submit questions in the chat, which a moderator can then choose some from. We perhaps have breakouts if our timing works out for that, about a couple of issues, and they could be different things, or we could just assign people into breakout rooms. And then we follow that up with this meeting that I think the biggest space we have in the town is at the Brooktondale Fire Department. And Evie was going to check and see if it was available on December 2nd. I don't know if you've heard anything, Evie.
I haven't yet. I called today and nobody answered, and I was going to Zoom up there, see if anyone was there. But I don't know if anyone has a suggestion of who would be more quickly reachable.
Yeah, let me go grab a number, Evie. I have a number.
Okay, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll check about that. And then I think we have to just be very clear about what the occupancy of that can be right now.
Yeah.
With seating. And we tell people that it's going to be kind of like first come, first serve with that number of people. Because I don't think any of us are going to feel really comfortable with standing room only in this current situation.
And what is the town process on checking for vaccination status? Is there a protocol for that, checking vaccination status and masks before somebody's allowed to enter a public gathering on behalf of the town?
Mark?
This is Mark. So yeah, we've asked people to mask and be vaccinated, and the way you would, so they would need to be prepared to show their vaccination card.
Okay, and we could
And
say that then.
so somebody from the town will check vaccination cards, so it's not the zoning commission members who have to check vaccination cards?
Sure.
Okay.
I think, yeah, we should do that.
Okay, so I think, and then at that meeting, we can think about the number of people there, and then we can ask people to help us fold chairs up and have these things around, and people can go from station to station. This is certainly going to need more work, but it seems to me if I've said that, is everyone pretty happy with that idea? And then we can work on the details later. Oh, Michelle, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up. There you are.
No, sorry, I just had another thought. Is it, as far as getting feedback, is it a good idea or to have like boxes or something around in different areas of the town so that at any time people could drop in a question? That, you know.
Sure, we can do that. We can do it in the, there's the
Good
box
idea.
on the door of the town hall. Not, yeah, and there's also, I'm sure,
Market?
we could do one at Brookton Market and maybe at the fire halls. And
Yeah.
I've put my email out there and I haven't really gotten any questions, but I think that would be good. So that's a good idea to have for questions, and we could add that in the document that we send out.
Okay, just
So
so that we were
anybody
just
else?
checking, anyway.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
So my question is really for Nan. Say we do a presentation, let's say from 2 to 2:30, you're recording. Are you available either of those Saturdays to answer the questions that someone will be reading from a card? Because you are our expert. We need you. And if you aren't available, we can't do this.
You mean for both the Zoom on the Thursday night and the following Saturday? Yeah,
Right.
I would make, unless it's a lot of snow, I would be there. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
and
And I wasn't
I
necessarily
think that-
expecting to be there in person, though. If you are, great. But I think it would be okay if that was a remote, like, people, you read your answer in or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we could certainly do that. Yes, yes.
I think it'd be great for Nan to be there in person if possible.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agreed.
And I think also that for the in-person thing, again, I'm more focused on the nitty-gritty of how we organize this. And are we going to do little breakout groups? So we have 4 corners of the room where we just randomly split people up, and then we have one of you assigned to each group, and you talk about, well, what did you just hear? What are your questions? Or we give everyone a postcard and a pencil, and they can write their questions down and hand them in, or both. So I think there's still some nitty gritty details to work out. And, to try and engage people in the small groups. If I don't know how many, there's 7 members of the committee, we could each, or maybe your facilitators that have nothing to do with the zoning commission would be better to facilitate those small little breakout groups, that we could all follow the same, so you put up the map and have a discussion about the map, or we'd have to think about how we facilitate those. But so I just would urge you to keep thinking about the details, because it's the details that are going to make this successful.
Yeah, I'm, Evie, I'm gonna call you next, but I'm gonna ask, if there are 3 or 4 people who will help kind of plan this in detail. I think it's really difficult to do this over Zoom, especially when I can't see people. But I think, if we have this general idea and in the next couple of weeks, we can sort of plan this. And I think then my idea was that our November 16th meeting would be to finalize the presentation. So so we would have one more meeting, do more work, and then the November 16th, we could finalize that presentation. But I'm going to take a few minutes, ask Evie, Evie had her hand up, and then move on to the timeline.
Okay, real quick, do we know whether there is adequate Wi-Fi at the fire hall?
I don't know now, but we need to ask that question.
Okay, I was going to ask it, but I thought if maybe anybody here knew that, that would be a pretty important thing to find out.
It would be critical, yes.
Yeah, it would be critical. I really like the idea that Nan mentioned about having 4 different tables, 4 different corners. I think we need maps at every station so people can refer to each one wherever they are, where they're having questions. I really like the idea of having boxes around. Any opportunity that we can invite and motivate input is way water down the creek for us to be able to say, hey, we made every effort there was to get people's feedback, and we need that input. So I like it. And I'm also happy to help with the nuts and bolts planning at the fire hall.
Thanks.
Evie?
Okay, Bill.
Yeah, just real quick, and then Bruce wants to get in. If this meeting, the in-person thing, if Nan's willing to come and we play a recording of her presentation, then that can be downloaded ahead of time. We actually don't need Wi-Fi at the fire hall necessarily, if
That's
Nan's
true.
willing to be there in person. So that just one quick point, and then time Bruce wanted to say. So.
Okay, Bruce.
Yep, no, Evie, you need to get a hold of Rick Latin.
Okay,
and
phone
his
number?
Is 659-7508. And I had asked him about the 16th of November, because I thought that's what we were gonna do, and it was open then, but he said just have somebody contact him to put it on the calendar.
Is that the date?
659-7508, Rick Latin.
659-7508. Is that, I thought the date we were talking about was later than that, December 2nd?
It is,
Yes, we're now talking about December 2nd, Thursday, and then the Saturday would be December 4th.
Do we have a
Right.
time in mind for
Not at
Saturday?
the moment, so like as much of the day as we can get, and then we'll figure it out.
Okay, fair
But
enough.
we only
Okay.
need the fire hall on December 5th, correct?
Oh, that's right. We only need the fire hall on December 5th, because everyone else is gonna
Fifth?
be on Zoom.
5th or
The
4th?
5th, the Saturday.
Okay.
The Saturday would be the 4th. The Saturday, the first Saturday.
With the
Okay.
with the 5th, that the 4th is busy.
Yes, okay. Okay, timeline. So I
Is
have,
it possible to ask a question?
no, I'm sorry.
Could I ask a question?
No,
Could
I'm
I ask
sorry.
a question?
No, I'm sorry.
That's what we get all the time here. We don't.
We had this discussion at an earlier meeting, and the committee decided that it just went way out of control and we lost our time. So I'm gonna ask you not to do that. Call me later or send me email, jeanmcfeeters@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to answer your question. Thank you. Timeline. By November 1st, we're gonna reserve the Brooktondale Fire Hall and other places. By November 5th, finalized document to be sent. Because we're gonna send out to everybody in the town a document that explains as much as we can of what we've done so far. And what I'm suggesting is how, a kind of a timeline. If the zoning commission appointed us in April, this is what we've been doing since, who we are. That exactly what our charge is to examine existing conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The town board has hired Rick and Nan to assist and guide us, and what they have given to us so far, that we were in the process of discussing and refining what an agricultural rural zone one or several hamlet zones and a commercial zone might entail, descriptions of that, the invitation to the in-Zoom meeting, and this open house that we've just discussed, and that we want public input and questions, and we hope that people will participate. And what I'm hearing now is that also that we'll have boxes in various places to leave questions or comments. So, and we'll also talked about having signs up in various places in town. Large signs like people had made for that, for the comprehensive plan and other meetings. Then by December, so we would get that mailing out by November 11th. That would give 3 weeks beforehand. So by November 5th, we want to finalize this document. At our November 16th meeting, we would finalize the presentation for the December 2nd meeting and perhaps practice, so we would know what we were doing. And on November 17th to 24th, we get the posters made and all the stuff that we're going to need, you know, Post-it notes, cards, pencils, all that stuff together. On November 30th, do a run through is my thought. Any comments about this? Please put your hand up because I can't see it if you're just raising your hand in the screen. Barbara.
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment about the kind of the summary that would go out to town residents. I'm not sure that it's necessary to say that, you know, that we've discussed an ag zone and we're working on hamlet zones. You know, just to in general talk about, you know, the concepts that the zoning commission is working on, because by the actual date of the public meeting, we may be farther along. You know, we may discussed other things than what's
That's
actually talked about in the summary.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to put their hand up? I see Bill.
So just quick, for this document that is to be finalized by November 5th, how is that getting written / produced? Is that you, Jean? Are you asking for a few volunteers from the committee?
I would love some volunteers because I think maybe what we could do is have one group who works on what the event is going to be and one group who works on writing the document. So I would be happy to take volunteers. Throw yourselves on your swords. That's what I say.
I'm expressly not going to volunteer for that because I'm gone next week, and that will totally derail that process. So I can't contribute to that paper that goes out.
Okay. Okay, anybody else want to think about writing?
This is Bruce.
Jean, I
Oh,
can
I-
certainly supply you with any summaries or text of things we've already done, you know, so we have, you know, we can pull from
Okay.
materials that we've already produced.
That'd be great. Why don't you do that? And I'd be happy to work on this. And then if I could get like 2 or 3 people who would read it and edit it, that would be really useful.
This is Bruce. I apologize. I'm going to be gone from the 30th to the 9th. And I will probably not have service, but I will try to get someplace where I can get some service so that
Okay.
I know what's going on. But once I get back on the 9th, I'm free to help with anything I can help with.
Thank you, Bruce. I would be happy to send you stuff and have you read it and comment.
Michelle has her hand up.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't see that. Michelle?
No, I'm just saying I'd be happy to be one of the people to read and edit and comment. I don't
Thank
feel
you, Michelle.
I don't know enough to like initiate much of that document, but happy to you know, give you feedback.
Yeah, and this is
Great.
Barb. I'd be happy to edit as well.
Excellent. Thank you. That is really useful. And Evie has volunteered to help with the thinking through what we're going to need for that, for the public meeting part, and also what the Zoom meeting will be like.
Anybody else want to help with that?
Maybe when Bill gets back, we can haul him in.
Ernie has his hand up.
Ernie?
I'm finding my mute button. Yeah, I'll help Evie.
Great.
we can-
Thank you. Ernie and Evie and me, and, you know, we'll figure it out. Good. Thank you so much, everyone. That has been really useful.
Dean, just one more thing, if it's of any help,
Sure.
because I have like this giant box of things, because I use these all the time. I have postcards, I have pencils, I have a million, stickers. I have foam boards and clips, to put maps on. Rick can get maps, we can get maps printed in, so that, whatever map you want to use in each group or at each station, whatever you want to call it. So if you need any of those things, I have a lot of supplies already.
Wonderful. That's great. We would be happy to get those from you. Great. Plus I personally love to go to a good stationery store myself. Not sure about anyone else. Okay.
It would, excuse me, Jean, it would be really nice to have 4 tripods, or I don't know what you call them, to put
Yes.
the maps up against. If those are available anywhere, those are kind of expensive to buy, so.
I have
The town
2.
probably has some.
I have 2.
Excellent.
Okay, excellent. Maybe we can get 2 more. The kind that would hold big sheets of maps.
Yeah. I think I have one. I will look. I think I have one from a past life. And I'm sure, and it's very possible that the fire departments have them also.
Yeah, that's what I was
So
gonna say.
we'll look.
Maybe the fire hall might have some.
Yeah,
Okay,
great. Okay, I'm turning this back over to Ernie.
Okay. I don't have the agenda in front of me anymore, but I think that we're now turning this over to Nan, and we're going to continue looking at the hamlet zones. Yes?
Yes. So, yeah, we have about a half an hour. And similar to our discussions that we had for the ag rural district, the object is for the zoning commission to offer not like the nitty gritty detail, but the direction that you perceive for the hamlet or hamlets, whatever it turns out to be, district. So I sent, and I apologize for sending this to you kind of close to the meeting, but it was what it was. So what this is, let me just make this bigger. Whoops, I guess it already is. Can you guys see that?
on the
Okay.
bottom of the screen, Nan,
Oh
on the
yeah, I
bottom
can do my
right,
little thing here.
can you do it there? The other way.
So there's the first place to start is to make sure, just like we started with our very first meeting, is to understand what the purpose of these districts are. So I just gave you a starting point for a purpose statement. And the way I have this set up is basically for the 2 hamlet types that we have been talking about. One is a more of a mixed use hamlet that has small businesses and residential mixed in. The other one is more of the smaller hamlets that would be just residential. So I don't know if any of you have had a chance to really read through these purpose statements yet. In general, they're both the same. They both start off with the kind of the traditional zoning. This whole first part is what you see everywhere, that we're doing this to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents and to promote growth and harmony with the comprehensive plan. That's kind of standard zoning language that is in every purpose statement. But then this first one is kind of the mixed use. So it's to allow for a variety of residential uses, along with the home occupations that go with those, and appropriately scaled small businesses in those towns suitable for a higher concentration of both residential and commercial. And then further purposes are to, in kind of general things about what distinguishes hamlets from the ag district is that recognize these hamlets as traditional concentrations of settlement to facilitate a higher density of residential development consistent with the character of those hamlets. Reinforce hamlets in your comprehensive plan. I think you called them as focus areas. And ensure this kind of goes back to our site plan design things, ensure that development has the scale and the layout and the design that are consistent with the traditional character and environment, to provide for a mix of housing types and opportunities to meet a variety of housing needs, and to build and maintain these hamlets as vital town centers. Those are my interpretations of what your comprehensive plan told me. They may not be how you interpret it, but it's, again, it's a place to start. The second purpose is much the same, only without the mixed use component in it. It's really more that you have some places where a mix of residences and businesses work, and in other places, they're really just concentrations of houses. They're really not commercial or retail focus areas. So the first place for the group to start, let me just make this just a tiny bit smaller and get this on one. So comments on the purpose statement for the hamlet, again, subject to change as we go along, but to start things off.
I'll just chime in and say, I think this is great. I think this reflects my thinking very, very well.
Okay. Bill?
Barb had her hand up first, so I'll let her go
Oh,
first.
sorry, Barb.
Thanks. I agree. I generally like these. I think in Hamlet 1, I would just offer that wherever the words commercial appears, that the word small should precede it. That happens in some of the phrases, but not all of the phrases. So always refer to small commercial within Hamlet 1.
Okay.
Okay, and I also am generally in favor. What I have been thinking about, musing about in my head, though, is in like in Hamlet type 2. So let's say someone wanted to put a convenience store near Schickleville, the Boyceville apartments. Maybe that's okay. So I keep musing in my own mind whether we really should say that Hamlet 2 has no commercial whatsoever. Maybe it can have a small amount of a much more restricted kind. So that's just a thought to throw out to the zoning commission. I don't know what other people think about that. And I also want to make the point, which I think we have talked about before, that I would not simply want this Hamlet 2 or residential hamlet to reflect areas where we currently happen to have greater density of housing. I think this is a planning tool. And so we would need to examine again some of those housing focus areas or something to maybe designate a number of areas of the town as suitable for higher residential density. That's a bunch of work, but that's what I would hope the zoning commission would grapple with at some point is that question, because we haven't decided where that is. And I don't know whether to call them hamlets or not. I don't have a better name though. So we have hamlet for our mixed use, and do we call it a residential hamlet or something else the other one? I don't know yet, but I'm not wild about residential hamlet.
Oh yeah, we can certainly call them whatever you're comfortable with. One of our options, they were actually called the place. So we have, Brooktondale, we have, Slaterville, whatever, so they could be the name, or they could be whatever you want to call them. And in terms of where they are, well, that's the $1 million question. Those have to be mapped. At some point we have to put something on a map. If you're going to have these districts, we have to say where they're going, either where they are or where they're going to be. So that is a question that's going to ultimately have to be answered. Evie?
Just a clarification for me, I probably missed this, but is this a one or the other, or potentially both? applying to different parts of the town?
Yes,
it
I
him?
think that it was both applying to different parts of the town. So
Okay.
some are more appropriate to have more small commercial, and others are more oriented to
Got it.
just residential or very
Okay.
limited. I think that's a decision you'll have to make. But yes, both. Evie, did you have something else?
No, that was my little bitty
okay.
question. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments on these purpose statements for now? You know, this is certainly not your last crack at these words, but to start us off, so we're all thinking kind of along the same line. All right, so then the question is, we kind of know what these areas are. And then, like we talked about in the last couple of meetings, then it comes down to what types of activities do you want to see occurring in these? So what I did here in this chart was basically there's two halves. One was for the Hamlet 1 and one was for the Hamlet 2. And I just made a list of the different kinds of residential uses that are out there or could be out there, and some other typical kinds of uses that you see in a Hamlet situation: home occupations, small scale solar, personal wind towers, you know, and we could come up with others. And then a list of potential commercial uses that might fit in a Hamlet 1 area with a shorter list of uses, and that list may change depending on how you go, but some things might be appropriate for the other Hamlet, whatever we're, for the sake of nomenclature, we'll just call it Hamlet 2 for now. So it goes back to you guys really giving some thought to what are these districts going to look like and how do you want them to function? So the question is, you know, let's start with the different kinds of residential uses. Barb, you had your hand up first.
Could you just clarify what home occupations minor versus major means?
Yes, I think we talked about that for the ag district, but home occupations minor are typically like someone who has a home base, they're working from home, or they have a home-based business. They sit in a room, they work on their computer, they have, you know, no need for customers coming in and out. You know, they're a writer or they're a lawyer or they're, you know, whatever, that are sitting working at home. Whereas a major home occupation would be someone who has like a beauty parlor in their home, or you know, they're baking and selling bread, you know, so there's customers coming and going, there's a need for a sign, they may have parking needs. So it's still home-based, but it's more intensive than the person that's just sitting in their dining room working at their computer. And my opinion on these is most rural areas don't really care about the minor ones. They're like, fine, you want to do it, go do it. We don't need to have you reviewed, permitted, or anything. But for the major home occupations that have signs and parking, they're really acting as a business. And so those typically get site plan review or special use permits, depending on, you know, how you guys feel about it. So that's the difference.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I guess what I would suggest on that for both Hamlet types is that if a major home occupation requires a separate building from the home, or requires, you know, a separate structure from the home, or requires parking, and I don't know how to word this in a legal sense, but would require parking beyond that normally thought of for, you know, a residential setting, that we would do some extra level of review, whether that's a special use permit or site plan review. I'm not sure. I'm less concerned about signage, distinguishing between minor and major, because I could see minor wanting some signage as well. But with the caveat that all signage should stick within certain design standards and requirements. And, perhaps that's going back and reviewing what the site plan review, what the new proposed site plan review law would include regarding signage, and determining if that needs to be even strengthened. Signage restrictions or guidelines need to be strengthened for hamlet related areas.
Evie?
I'm looking at these
Oh.
two. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, looking at these two options for Hamlets 1 and 2, I'm just continually brought to the realization that I will change my mind, perhaps, depending on what mapping we end up doing. And it would be hard, and I'd be hard pressed to say, yes, this should be in Hamlet 1 and not in Hamlet 2, or vice versa, without knowing what the boundaries and parameters are of the particular hamlet we're talking about, whether it's a small Hamlet 2 or a larger Hamlet 1. So I'm just thinking out loud a little bit about that and wonder where other people are.
Bill?
I'll just try to, I think good point, a good question, Evie. And I think that at least for me, the way I try to think about it is, because I know this may not be the final areas, but I think about indeed that stretch of Brookendale Road that's got a relatively high housing density, and a couple others are apartments, and a couple are just larger single family homes, but smaller than us rural folks, and or the area that could be developed around the Boyceville area, there could be additional dense housing going there. So those are sort of regions I think about. Doesn't mean those are definitely the ones they're going to be, but I think in my head, when I try to think about a denser housing area, that's what I think about. Just to give me a little example. So that's what I do. And I'm basically agreeing with what Barb has suggested. I think that's great. And most of these residential things I think are fine in both kinds of hamlets. I guess we get down to the commercial uses that we may have more discussion on that.
Barb?
I just wanted to comment that I tend to think that the zoning commission should be as inclusive as possible on residential issues, residential types. And so I would propose that all of these residential issues that are residential uses that you've laid out for both Hamlet 1 and Hamlet 2 would be acceptable. Everything in this list except wind towers. I would want to understand more about those and perhaps ask for a special use permit for those, because I don't know. I don't know enough about, like height and structure and all of that sort of stuff. I have seen enough of small scale solar panels that I think they should be allowable in either hamlet type, but I just don't know enough about wind towers to wonder about how they really would be situated and would work within a kind of a dense residential area. So I just don't know enough about that. But all the other residential issues, including multifamily structure, including manufactured housing, including all of those, I would suggest we allow them in both hamlets.
How does everyone else feel about that? Bruce, you
Yeah, I like what everybody has said so far. I do think mapping is going to have a lot to say once we get down to putting things on a map. It'll be make things a little clearer, and we might indeed change our mind on it. I agree with Barb on the the towers, the wind. I'm not so sure about that. I'm also not real sure about the adult uses. in both residences? I would think it wouldn't be, but there again, I don't think you can hold that out. So. But I think that a lot of these parallel each other. I think in both zones, you could have it. My other question was, when you say accessory apartments in an accessory structure, that would mean like a garage with a apartment over it or something?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah, many places allow like you want to make an apartment in your house, but they don't allow it in, a garage, an apartment over a garage. But I think in many rural areas, and especially given affordable housing issues we have in most communities, I think that's a very traditional, people have done that for years and years. And so,
right.
yeah.
Right.
So Jean, you have your hand up. I think you're muted, Jean.
Jean, are
Maybe you
you,
didn't hear me. Well, I don't know. Jean, did you have your hand up?
Anybody know sign language?
Jean.
I don't know if she can see us.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
Let-
she can't see us.
All right, well,
Well-
if she joins, she can, can
Yeah.
we move down to the commercial
Yes,
parking?
that's what I
thinking
was
where
just
we're
gonna say.
likely
I
to-
mean, I
Oh,
sense that
there's Jean. There's Jean.
Oh, Jean, yes, you had your hand up for this. No?
I did.
Okay.
I think my biggest question was about fuel stations. I would only limit those to a hamlet that I thought had what I think of as a major commercial use. But
Okay.
not the electric vehicles, but I think gasoline. I just think practically everything is too close to a stream here. So. Just worries me.
Okay.
Okay, interesting question. I don't know how I feel about that would say that Speedsville shouldn't get a gas station if someone wants to put one there. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I guess I'll just say that. But a good point, because again, gas stations are particularly prone to pollution issues. And
Yeah.
So excellent point. Yeah, just looking at this list a little bit, yeah, most of the small, again, I would think about maybe a convenience store being allowed in a Hamlet 2 type. Other than that, I'm fine with the restrictions of not retail sales in general, and definitely not gas station-y things. So yeah, I think the list is pretty good, except maybe adding a convenience store.
I mean, some of these other things are already in your local law, your commercial solar batteries you'll have, and I think cell towers, adult uses, it's not that we can't change those, but they're already established as to where they could go, especially the adult uses. But so are there other things that are on here that you think are appropriate? I mean, so we have two big categories. Service businesses and offices are all encompassing, and then also retail. So the thing that goes along, where do I have? So retail. So some of the other things to think about is it retail, any kind of retail, or is it, we have talked like in the ag and rural district, we had talking about the scale needs to be the right scale. So, is a Walmart supercenter something that you want? It's a retail store. Or are you talking about, as Barb said, a small retail that might be 5,000 square foot or 3,000 square foot or 10,000 square foot, whatever the number might be. So these can all be tempered by other standards to make sure that they are appropriately scaled and designed to fit into the hamlet. Evie.
How do we think about something like a dollar store, a Dollar General? Where does that fit in and what restrictions or
Yeah, that
allowed?
would be a retail sales, and and the restrictions on that could be by size. It could be by design. Their Dollar General is not known for its flexibility in design. And they're not really known for flexibility in size. They have kind of a standard formula, and that's what they use. So you could establish the design standards and the size limits that you feel are appropriate for that location.
If I could just jump in here on that, just on that comment. I was traveling in Vermont a few weeks ago and actually saw some dollar stores. I don't remember the branding of it, but dollar stores that were very different than the design and the signage that I see here, around communities in central New York, which made me wonder whether Vermont, whatever communities in Vermont I happen to be driving through might have had either statewide or local level restrictions, zoning requirements, and the dollar, whatever it was, responded to those. And so it's not that we're beholden to whatever usual standards they have for building and signage.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's if you say you will build a building with, a peak roof or, whatever the standards might be, that's how communities in the Adirondacks have Adirondack looking Dollar Generals, because they make them, that's their requirement. So this one especially is where size, scale, and your design standards are really critical. And in your comprehensive plan and your task force, you spent a lot of time talking about formula businesses. This is where those would really seriously come into play.
And that's exactly where I was going with this. There's definitely pretty strong language about formula businesses in the comp plan, and that got picked up on the site plan review law revisions. So I think we probably would want some sort of restriction on size just in general, because I think, again, not that there would likely be, but like a Walmart supercenter coming in here would be totally out of scale with the town. But I think that the debate will really come down to whether formula businesses should not be allowed anywhere in town, or whether there might be a specific hamlet or hamlets in which they would be. And I think there's been a debate about this, I think, in the town. I think that we should in general put severe restrictions on formula businesses. And as I think I've indicated before, I think along the Route 79 corridor, which basically means Slaterville Springs, there might be more leniency for having that. Because that would fit in more with the kind of businesses and traffic, et cetera, that are there, and wouldn't fit so well with the character of Brookendale or Speedsville, for example. But it's not just a Dollar General, it's a Starbucks, it's a whatever. But I think that to keep our commercial center of Brookendale healthy, I just assumed there wasn't a Starbucks there. I like it being Brookens Market and the other things that are there. So I guess my vote is yes, we have restrictions. Formula business will be strictly limited to certain regions of the town or not at all. And there's an additional size restriction of some kind to be determined to keep huge enterprises that aren't in keeping with the character of the town out. That's my own view.
Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the task force this fall spent an awful lot of time discussing these particular issues. And I think 2 or 3 things they came up with. I think they had kind of a consensus on 2 or 3 large matters. One is a matter of scale. And so I think that the task force, and they built it somewhat into the site plan review law. But as I recall, really the tipping point would be over 3,000 square feet for scale. I think also formula business, as I understood the conversations, there was actually very, very strong support of banning formula businesses across the board. But if not, I think that the task force understood that they would be most appropriately positioned in a commercial zone as opposed to a residential zone. But I don't know if that's helpful, but I just wanted to bring up that conversation because the task force spent so much time hashing it out.
Right. Other comments? So I think there's going to be, the retail sales is where, most of these, the scale and the design standards for your site plan law will come in, because in the hamlet, especially where you have a mix of uses, you have to be very careful that they complement and are consistent with each other, because then you get into what Jay was talking about earlier, where you have some nuisance use come in next to a residential use, and we want to do everything we can to ensure that they are compatible and that they work together. So other comments on this list of potential businesses in a mixed area? Tim, did you have your hand up still? No, okay.
Quick question about lodging. So for example, great, maybe, you have a small hotel, but I mean, would there be a place to limit the size of, that it has to be only up to 10 rooms or whatever? Is that an appropriate thing to do?
Sure, lots of places. Yeah, you can define it to be, you can say, well, we're going to allow inns, and they're defined as lodging for transient users up to 10 rooms or up to 20 rooms or whatever the number you choose. Yes, so you can certainly scale those to be appropriate.
All right. I don't know what the right number is, but I would want to do that. Because I don't think we need, again, it wouldn't really be in keeping with the character to have a 100-person hotel or 100-room hotel in. But I also do want to allow someone that's running a bed and breakfast, obviously, or again, even a small, I guess they call them boutique hotels, might be appropriate or okay.
Nan, do you have any guidance on that as far as the number of rooms? I was part of a group that was trying to ban a hotel in the place in Maine that was a very sensitive area, and they wanted to put 40 rooms available. Do you have any sense of what would be reasonable for this area?
Well, there's no common denominator here. It depends on the lot size, it depends on the lot, it depends on the surrounding uses. For what I know about your hamlet areas, certainly, you get beyond 20 rooms, that's getting to be, certainly a more intensive use. I can think of several communities who called them like country inns and said that they can't be more than 15 rooms. So yeah, your boutique kind of hotels. Any of your chains, Fairfield Inn, Motel 6, Holiday Inn, they're all, lots and lots of rooms. They would never come into an area that had a restriction for 20 rooms. But people who might want to do a small inn with a restaurant, 20 rooms might even be a lot. We have one not too far from where I live that's a restaurant with, I think they have 10 rooms, and it's very successful and it fits in great into this village setting. So I think that there's not a magic number, but I would say probably less than 20.
Thank you.
Okay, well, you guys can think about that a little more. We have Oh, we have no time left. Let me just take 2 minutes and introduce this for you to start thinking about. So just like we talked about with the Ag Rural District, that in addition to saying these are the uses that are going to be allowed and promoted in this particular location, we're going to also have development standards to make sure they fit in. And in a hamlet district especially, that's where the site plan for commercial uses are going to be critical. But this list here is just some typical things that I think are potential development standards that you might want to see go along with your hamlet development. You know, certainly if you have a larger parcel of land that might fall into a hamlet district, it can be subdivided. But in a hamlet area, instead of designing around the open space, typically we design them to be what's called a traditional neighborhood. So they're clustered like an old, like a old-fashioned village green, you know, so there would be like a green, like a small pocket park, and the smaller houses on smaller lots clustered together to look like a village kind of setting rather than a country kind of setting. So you could allow for large subdivisions in your hamlet areas, but that to be designed a little differently with a traditional neighborhood design. We can certainly talk about in the hamlet, a minimum lot size might be is usually more acceptable. We talked about that with the Ag Rural District and talked about that density was more important. In a hamlet area, the consistency of the lot sizes tends to be more important because that's what gives the streetscape and the neighborhoods the kind of the consistent character, is when the lots are uniform and the houses are more uniform than you would see out in the rural areas. So you can think about that. Just like we talked about before, that there's some places in the hamlets that are going to have the stream or the flood zone. And so not every piece of every parcel is equally buildable than every other parcel. So our net acreage that we talked about last meeting might have a play in one or both of these areas. Sidewalks is kind of a hallmark of a hamlet. Now, I don't think any of your hamlets have sidewalks. So maybe you don't want sidewalks, but maybe you want to promote that in the future. So you might want to think about, are there places that you might eventually want sidewalks?
Sladeville Springs does have sidewalks.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And Brookendale has a broken,
Brookendale.
interrupted one and needs to be connected.
Yeah,
So, you know, the zoning is an opportunity to say over time, as things get developed or redeveloped, we're going to rebuild that sidewalk system. So that's something to think about. This next one is really important in hamlets. It's typically where we have street or tree-lined streets. You only get tree-lined streets when development occurs, is when you tell people they have to plant a tree. And certainly for commercial developments, that's the landscaping is always part of the site plan review. And street trees are really important in hamlets. They're important for climate. They're important for aesthetics. They're important for slowing traffic down. Street trees have huge roles in our perception of what a community looks like. So street trees are, I think, a really important component that you might want to think about in the hamlets. Some of
Brookendale
these
used-
are, yeah, sorry, what?
Yeah, no, Brookendale used to have trees and sidewalks all the way through it.
Yeah, and the
Back-
trees have probably died and the sidewalks kind of crumbled and you lose them over
No,
time.
it extended to the highway and
Oh,
they made it
mhm.
wider and they tore up all the old slate sidewalks and cut down all the trees.
Yes, yep.
there's also an issue with the utilities, because the utilities will come in and just decimate beautiful trees. And
Yes.
so
Right.
where That's actually a real issue. It just looks horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They cut right through the middle of them.
Yep.
Right. Right. You know, some of these other things are typically controlled by your site plan review. The size we talked about. You've already mentioned that retail or other commercial uses might need control of size. We talked last time about identifying the part of a subdivision that is buildable, and that's where the building envelope would go. We talked last time about setbacks, and I know that there's some feelings among those of you on, at least some of you on the zoning commission, that you don't want to impose setbacks, but I think the front setback in a hamlet situation is really something that controls this, that creates the streetscape. So I would urge you to at least think about that in the hamlet areas. You know, I will say again, I'm not a fan of road frontage requirements, but it's certainly a common, certainly commonly seen to have road frontage requirements. You already have stormwater management and control. Building height, I think, you know, they're typically 2.5 stories. Commercial buildings maybe 3 stories, but you might want to think about one of the things that has kind of created suburban commercial strips where every commercial strip looks like every other commercial strip. It's not just because they use franchise buildings, but because they're putting in 1-story buildings that in an area that normally would have 2 stories or 2.5 stories. And so some communities that are really concerned about their community character are now saying it's got to be a 2-story building. We'll let you have an apartment or apartments above the commercial space so you can use it. Some communities are saying if you're only going to have a 1-story, it has to have a peak roof or some sort of facade that makes it fit in. So if you take your traditional streets and look around, I bet there's very few flat 1-story buildings in there. There may be a few here and there, but it's typically not the vernacular that we see in upstate New York. So you can think about the importance of building height contributes to the character of the aesthetics of the area and how it functions. It also is very tied to the formula businesses because they're almost always 1-story flat roof buildings. You know, building placement and design, that's almost all the site plan. But little things like using fully shielded light fixtures so someone doesn't put a light, you know, a street light in a parking lot that shines into the neighbor's house 20 feet away. And certainly sign regulations are also typically have different regulations in a hamlet than they do in a rural area. In terms of size, in terms of whether they are externally lighted or internally lighted, whether they're landscaped or on a pole. So this is a list of things that go along with the uses that I think are really important to promoting the kind of character and the style of development. So, you know, not every retail business is created the same. So you could say, yeah, we want a convenience store, but we want to control how that convenience store looks so it fits in. So that's where the second part of our regulations, it's the uses and then the standards that go along with those uses for you to think about. So I guess we'll have to pick up a little more because unless you have 5 minutes of comments that you want to make on these. Anyone want to throw anything in, or have you kind of exhausted yourselves for tonight? Oh, Jean, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
I just wanted to say that I did send out a note saying that I had checked with the county health department and their minimum lot size for essentially a septic system, though they call it some long phrase, is 1 acre.
Right.
Which I think in some of our hamlets may make it almost impossible for anyone else to build.
Meaning because the lots are already too small?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about in Sladeville particularly, where it backs up onto the creek. I have no idea. I don't even know how the places that are there have septic systems when I think about it. But that's an issue that and we don't have any control over that.
No,
Unless
we don't
we
have
can-
control over it, but, you know, in the future, there may be a public sewer system, and so the zoning can allow for a 10,000 square foot lot, even if it is not allowed.
Okay,
currently. You know,
Right.
okay,
so
that's
put in,
handy.
put in a septic system, a public sewer, and then you could develop to a greater density. So, you know, we don't
Okay.
really have to be beholden to the health department on that.
But
Okay.
wouldn't that be, just for clarification, Ernie, wouldn't that be something that one wouldn't worry about now, but then would build into future revisions of a zoning law?
Well, that too, but I don't think that we should, you know, start off by zoning hamlets at 1 acre density. You know, I think that if we're gonna do these hamlets, we should, you know, think about what type of density we would think would be appropriate, and then create zoning that will allow that to happen should there be somebody with the deep pocket who wants to put in the septic system, you know, or the sewer system. So, yeah, you can change it in the future, but I don't know that should force us to, or, you know, encourage us not to do the right thing from the beginning.
Yeah, Tim, usually what happens is you have two lines. You would say, well, you know, the minimum lot size without water or sewer system is 1 acre. But if you have water and sewer, it's a 1/4 acre or whatever size it was going to be. So you create the opportunity for that to happen.
And I can chime in, and I concur with Ernie. I think it, you know, it sometimes takes time, of course, to amend the zoning law, and you would want to get caught not prepared if someone then did put the sewer line in, et cetera. So I think that's probably just as well to deal with it now.
All right. So I guess I just had one other question, and that was just more of a schedule. So are we having a meeting is our next meeting November 16th or is it November 9th? Because I had both
It's
of them on my
November 9th.
calendar.
It's November 9th, and then the second meeting in November is the 16th. Because
Okay.
we're not having one on the 23rd. And we may just try to get together, not all of us, but some of us, and practice on the 30th if we feel that we need to do that. So
Okay.
let's hold that on our calendars, but it wouldn't be a regular meeting from my point of view.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. I want to let you know that on the 9th, I have a conflict that night, but Rick will be here in my stead to go over whatever needs to be gone over that night. So we won't miss a beat because of that.
Okay, so Nan, I think I'll set up a meeting and we'll talk about what we should do at that meeting. So
Yes,
that we can be
absolutely.
prepared
Yep.
for that.
Yep.
Good. And I will work on writing this kind of document that's an invitation to our meetings, and get that out to people, and also communicate with people about us trying to start planning for this as this week goes forward. Happily, I don't have a lot of paid work this week. So that's so I've got some time. So good. Thank you all. I think we actually had a very productive meeting this evening.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I was
Yes.
gonna ask Mark, there was talk about putting boxes up for people to put comments in or questions. Does the town have anything like that? Any kind of boxes that we could put somewhere, or is that something we have to look to make, or? Is Mark still with us, or?
I'm here. I don't think we have anything like that. And my other thought was that that people should I mean, it's obvious that people should feel free to drop comments with the town clerk or at the town hall. So, I mean,
Right.
we could certainly create boxes to distribute. So,
We will, I'll have that, I just wrote that down to make sure that I talk about that as I'm getting this stuff together. Thank you, everyone, and let's see. Bruce, it's you who are gonna be away, I think, this coming week, is that correct?
Yes, I'll be gone the 30th to the 9th, so.
Okay, well, have a good time.
Thank you.
And everyone else, I think we need a call to adjourn. Someone wave at me.
great.
Okay,
Everyone
thank
wave.
you. Thank you. We are going to adjourn now, and we will see each other on the 9th. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks, Nan.
Thank you.